when we get our first full week on Nehemiah. The sheets are in the back. To go with a very brief review of our even briefer introduction that we did last week, we talked about the fact that this book is usually identified classically in our sources as part of the Book of Ezra. There aren't two separate books. We talked about that. We noted the major themes that we're going to see within this first chapter are basically an update on the state of the Jews in Jerusalem at this period, the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, and we're going to also see Nehemiah's religiosity on display. We talked a little bit about timing / identity of who Nehemiah is. Specifically, we talked about the question of identifying Nehemiah with Zerubbabel or not. Did he come in earlier? Did he come in later? Going with the chronological read of the book, he's later. Zerubbabel is the beginning. Nehemiah is much later on in our history. But let's move forward from there. So, first of all, in terms of Nehemiah's role, who is Nehemiah in this story? What's his identity? So he starts out as a key member of the court of a Persian king known to us as Artaxerxes. We've talked about Artaxerxes before. That's the king who sent Ezra in his 7th year. He sent Ezra, this is now the 20th. We noted already that we don't know if it's the same Artaxerxes. We have the idea that Artaxerxes may be an inherited title. It just means king. King, Pharaoh, Abimelech, Artaxerxes, title for the person who is on the throne at the moment. So it's possible this is an entirely different individual. We don't know. What we also don't know about Nehemiah is his lineage. All we get is his father's name is Chachaliah. Okay, Chachaliah is not a familiar name. It's not one of those, like in our list of names that we saw, in which various names repeated, and we said those are popular names. We didn't see any Chachaliahs. Both. Chet, Chaf, Lamed, Yud, Hey. Yes. It is a nightmare for non-Hebrew speakers. Chachaliah, that's all you need. You need a cold in order to be able to pronounce that one. But we really don't know. The Daf Mikra actually floats the idea that Chachaliah is an Egyptian name, which will be very interesting. I mean, there were Jews in Egypt who had fled there after the destruction of the first temple. So theoretically, it could be someone from that community of Jews who were there. But we don't know. We don't know how it was that Nehemiah ended up in his position in the king's palace. We don't get that kind of information. Daniel, we know all about how he ends up in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. He's a trophy, right? With Nehemiah, we don't know, and he's certainly not in a trophy position, as we're about to see. We don't know how long he held this position, meaning it's the 20th year of Artaxerxes. Has he been doing this for a year? Has he been doing this for 20 years? Did he do it before Artaxerxes came to power? We're not given any information. Contrast that with Ezra, where we got 15 generations of his family line. And through Artaxerxes' testimony about Ezra, we knew something of his role before he made Aliyah. Here we really get nothing. He is the cupbearer, though. So if you would have asked me what it means to be a cupbearer, I would have said what I suspect most of you would have said, which is, it's not a terribly dignified position. Like, you're the person who, the king wants a drink, they call him and say, bring him some wine. Right? That's what I would have assumed the cupbearer was. It's presented actually in Jewish sources as a taster, which puts it even lower, right? He's a taster to make sure it's not poison. In which case, if he managed in that role for 20 years, that would be amazing. That just means the king is really well liked. So take a look, though, at source number 1. I bring you a quote from Dov Zakheim's book. Now, I mentioned this book in the beginning of the year last year when I was talking about other sources you could read to learn more about Ezra and Nehemiah. And I'll take a moment to flesh out some comments on the book. Dov Zakheim was a high up in the U.S. government for a long time, in various governments. And that's the perspective that he brings to it when he writes about Nehemiah. He sees Nehemiah as something of a spiritual ancestor. Here's somebody who's high up in the Persian government, and look at his adventures, and that's the sort of career that I could have in my position in the U.S. government. He's very good at bringing sources both Jewish and secular to bear. So he's not afraid to bring in secular and non-Jewish commentaries to Nehemiah in order to make a point. And he's also familiar with the classic Jewish commentaries as well. He uses the Da'at Mikra edition. He uses various standard commentaries on the Mikra Ukedolot, Radak, Mitzudat David. There are some mistakes here and there in the book, factual misquotes, that type of thing. But overall, he's good at bringing sources. My only real problem with the book, and I stress it because I think it is an important thing, more broadly when you're dealing with contemporary scholarship, is he's an autodidact. He taught himself. It's very clear. Like he may have had courses at some point on secular biblical scholarship, but it looks like he picked a lot of books off the shelf, read through them, understood them, and was able to digest them into what he provides. Which, on the one hand, is nice. It's fresh. On the other hand, one of the weaknesses is, and this is what we were just talking about, is that he tends to have his theory of what's going on, and he'll quote whichever side of the sources will support the theory. So on this, Mitzudat David will support his idea. On that, Blankenshop will support his idea. And that's what he'll bring. I would have preferred a clearer line of approach, like these commentators are based in historical evidence, therefore I adopt them. This is based on association with other books in Tanakh, therefore I support that. He kind of goes back and forth in it. I do think it's a good read. I think it's a worthwhile read, but you have to keep that in mind as you go through it. Yeah. So I'm blanking right now on his roles, but he was deputy chief of something. Like he was fairly high up in it. If I remember, I'll send out later. I did a book review. Oh, you know what? No, I didn't bring it. I was going to say I brought it, but I didn't.
You don't have a Google thing?
I have a phone, but I'm sitting here teaching a class. I'm not about to Google him. No. But I'm going to send out later. No one else should do that either.
In this room, I can tell you.
Okay. I'm going to send out later the book review that I did last year for Toronto Torah, and you'll see there a little bit of his background. But he writes. Take a look at source number 1. He's basing himself on the Book of Tobit, which is from the Apocrypha, books that did not make it into Tanakh. It is considered to be a Jewish book. Why it's not in Tanakh? Some of the books of the Apocrypha clearly don't make it simply because they're too late in history to be canonized. Some of the books seem to contain elements that are problematic from a Jewish traditional perspective, and maybe that's why they're not in. But take a look at what he says about the position of the cupbearer. The cupbearer to the Persian emperor was an extremely powerful courtier. So he's not, cannon fodder for the poison. Like the biblical Joseph, and for that matter, the Persian cupbearer Achikar, whom the author of the apocryphal Book of Tobit describes as, quote, keeper of the royal seal, calculator of the accounts, Nehemiah was virtually a second in command to the emperor. So This is clearly an important position, not a minor position. It's a rotating position, interestingly, which I imagine would be done to prevent anybody from sort of amassing his own entourage and support within the court. So you have a few people, and every 2 years it goes to a new person within the circle. Zakheim was of the opinion that Nehemiah may not have been in his position long. And the reason he says that is because, as we're about to see in the story, a fellow named Hanani comes from Judea with a report about how terrible things are, and if Nehemiah had been in this position for years, they would have come to him before. I'm not so sure that supposition is correct, because as we're going to see, the Hanani who comes to meet with Nehemiah might be reporting on a recent event, something that had just happened, as we're going to see when we get to the story. Ralph and then Susan.
Well, I just wondered whether the cupbearer has any ritual significance.
Right, apparently not. This isn't a religious role, and no, seems not to be. He doesn't even make the bracha for him.
It's not like a cardinal.
No, not that I've seen. Yes, Susan.
if you say it's a rotating position, he couldn't have had it for a long time.
Right.
Because, I mean, it would contradict.
No, not necessarily. If it's a rotating position and he's within a group and they take turns every 2 years,
Oh, so he gets back again.
yeah, and he's always going to be high up. Meaning the people who have this rotation are not. Now you're the cupbearer, and now you watch the door in the back of the palace.
I sort of thought you were nothing after and you came back in.
Right? I don't think you can really do that. In the Israeli government, they do that. Right? One day you're Minister of Defense, and then you lose favor with the Prime Minister or whatever it is, and now you're a nothing, and then we'll pull up somebody else. But generally speaking, that's not the way governments do things.
Yeah, compared to the Pharaoh
Yeah.
and the Joseph son,
Yeah.
that was a major figure in the government.
Yes.
Same deal.
So it would appear. So we know he's the cupbearer. We know it's an important position, and really Joseph is our best biblical analogy. Joseph and Mordechai, at the end of Esther, are really the only other ones biblically to hold this kind of a position in a foreign government. Daniel, actually, I should say also. Daniel is a fair example also. We get no genealogy, as you mentioned, in introducing him other than this Chachalia, which may mean he's a nobody. It could mean that he's not an aristocrat member of the Judean royal line. But then the question is, why is he in this position? Maybe merit. I don't know. He doesn't say. It could be that he didn't deem it worth recording. But that's strange as well. Because, first of all, we saw Ezra get his whole family recorded, right? Number one. But number two, Nehemiah is going to be criticized, we're going to see later on, for playing himself up in the course of this book. For describing himself as the sort of the savior. And so, if so, I would have expected, unless he's going to describe himself as a self-made person, I would have expected he'd tell us all about his lineage and his family and how wonderful they were. It's a strange thing.
Well, he has to build himself up because he has to know his lineage.
So maybe that's why he's compensating.
Yes.
Could be. Yes, Alicia.
Unless could it have been edited out to see if he builds himself up and to see the other the embarrassment of this guy, the son of all these
Right.
other people, so maybe they were out of
Take him down a peg?
Right.
So the problem, it's an interesting idea. The problem is then there were other things they should have taken out, as we're going to see shortly. Like, he takes credit for things, like, that's what I would have taken out. The line about how wonderful I am, and look what I did for the Jewish people, as opposed to, my great-grandfather was so-and-so. No? In lineage? Oh, you mean in terms of praising herself? Yes, and she gets taken down a peg for it in the commentaries for doing so. Correct. Ad shakamti dvora, right? Until I came, then things got better. Correct. Yes, Janine.
Was this written by Nehemiah?
That's not so. The men get it also, as we're about to see. Sorry?
Was this written by Nehemiah? Or was it
Yes.
written by Ezra?
Yes. So I think we said at the end of last week, the assumption is that Nehemiah is actually the writer, and you see it's in first person. It's presented as him speaking.
Why would it not be? Why is it a Christian invention to have a separate book? I mean, do you ever have like someone writing his
Yeah.
and
I mean,
part of another?
it's not usually this largest section, but Yehoshua, right, at the end of the book describes the events from after his death, and it's very clear it's not being written. But although he's not credited with writing the first part, so maybe that's what you mean. In other words, Ezra is credited with writing the first part. No, I think their breakup of it into two books is logical, but it just wasn't done. We never did it. It was describing. Keep in mind, Ezra only showed up in chapter 7 of the book of Ezra, and he is going to be an actor throughout Nehemiah. So it will be kind of odd to have the book of Ezra with 10 chapters of which he shows up for 4. Right? And then the book of Nehemiah, in which he has more activity than he had in the book of Ezra. So this really was the book of Ezra, even if it was authored by Ezra and then Nehemiah. Yeah.
What is this? I'm reading the commentary here. And it says that Nehemiah was a decade after Ezra. After the book of Ezra.
Yeah.
Do we have any...
Yeah, no, we talked about this. We said that Ezra showed up in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes and Nehemiah in the 20th. Right? And then we had the discussion right in the beginning today. That we don't know if it's the same Artaxerxes, but yeah, no, that's what they're drawing on. in terms of what he ends up doing, he becomes a leader in building up the walls of Yerushalayim. As a matter of fact, for those who've seen Zechariah has a vision at one point of a stone with 7 eyes on it. And commentators take it as representing 7 leaders. And one of those 7 leaders is Nehemiah. He becomes involved in religious leadership as well, alongside Ezra. And he makes many enemies. And here we get something which we saw way, way back in Job. If you flip your Tanakh for a second to Job chapter 38. It is page... There we go. Yeah, you want page 1670. 1671 won't really help you here. Here you need the Hebrew. And they actually show it to you. It's in the middle of the page on 1670. If you go to the end of the line, you see there are 2 words on consecutive lines in which the ayin is suspended in the air. Each time, the word sounds like it is Rishaim, which means wicked people. But if you take out the ayin, it is Rashim, which means people who are poor, people who are impoverished. If you now jump into the English translation, you'll see what it says. Sentences 13 and 14. This is part of God's lecture of Job. Right? You want to tell me how to run the universe, maybe you should get some work experience. So he says, starting in 12, because I guess that's really where the line begins. Did you ever in your life command the morning or teach the dawn its place? To grasp the edges of the earth and shake the wicked from it. As it changes itself, as a seal does to clay, as people come into being like the earth's garment, as light is withheld from the wicked, that's the second appearance of the word wicked, and their raised arm is broken. So that's the line. And it's about the withholding of light from the wicked, the shaking of the wicked from the world. Clear? This is an incredibly dramatic passage. So take a look now at source number 2, please. And what the Talmud has to say about that passage. Obviously, the sages are going to notice when there's a letter ayin that's floating above the line. That's not something we see, I think, anywhere else. So, mitnei ma ayin shel rishaim tzluya. Why is the letter ayin of the word rishaim suspended? Why is it in midair? Kevan shenasa adam rush milamata nasa rush milamala. And the answer is that what this text is trying to say is, when someone becomes rush meaning poor in the sense that he has enemies here in this world, then that's a sign that he has enemies up in the heavens. If people don't like you, it's a sign that God doesn't like you. Oh boy. There's a mission in Pirkei Avos that talks about the spirit of people.
If you're poor, like it's really a punishment?
No, it's not about poverty. No. It's a statement of, if a person has enemies down here, if they're besieged by enemies down here, they're also besieged by enemies upstairs. That's the idea. So it says Rishaim, but it also says Rashim. Right, so that's what I was saying. Here, the idea of being poor is the idea of having enemies. That's really the idea in this context. Yeah, besieged by enemies is the way it's usually taken. So then they ask, if you want to say the person is rush here and up in the heavens, if you want to say a person who has enemies, God doesn't like them also, then what's the letter ayin doing there at all? Why is there an ayin? It's not about being wicked, it's about being somebody who has enemies. So the answer of Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar answer that there were 2 figures in Jewish leadership who had many enemies, but it wasn't because they were wicked people. One was King David, and the other was Nehemiah. And lest people read this and interpret that must be Nehemiah is a bad guy because he had enemies, therefore we sort of insert the ayin to read the line as those who are wicked, not those who are surrounded by foes. If you take a look at number 2, you see I brought you the Gemara and I brought you Rashi. And Rashi says he had many Jewish enemies who sought to kill him for building the temple. He, Nehemiah, had enemies who were upset. What business do you have building up the temple? Meaning, who is going to be angry about that? The Samaritans, right? The nations around us. Alternatively, there were many Jewish zealots. And that's why the ayin is there to say that this comment about people with enemies is not actually about, it's not about righteous people, it's about wicked people. Don't read this as being about righteous people. If righteous people have enemies, it's because it's the enemy's fault. If wicked people have enemies, it's because they're bad. This way we have saved the honor of Nehemiah, but the reason why I quote this is to show you the Talmudic recognition, and we're going to see it in the text, that he wasn't the most popular leader we ever had. There were issues there. Janine.
I'm a little bit off the track, but how does if you say that, how does the end of that saying go? Naseh Rash Nilmala. That sounds like a punishment if he's not looked at. If it's not his fault and it's wicked people that hated him, why should...
Right, then he won't be. This isn't referring to him. It's only referring to wicked people. In other words, if he's a good guy and he has enemies, that's not a function of God's attitude to this person. It's only if he earned it by being bad, that's when it's a reflection of God. Either way, it's not a punishment. What they're suggesting is really no different from what you see in a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Kol sheruach habrios nocha himenu, ruach hamakom nocha himenu. If people like somebody, God likes them. What in the world is that about? So generally we understand that it's a statement that God wants people to get along with others. He's not looking for a person to offend the world. That's the general understanding of what that passage is about in Pirkei Avos, and the same idea here. So in the event that someone has enemies and is a function of his wickedness, then you should know it's probably also God is not happy with him either. But on the other end, if he's a good guy, then the fact that there are people who hate him because he's doing good things doesn't mean that God is upset with him also. In the end, what we've done is we've neutralized the line, and in the process what we've done is we've taken it away from having any meaning whatsoever. Right? Because now you can always just interpret it however you like. Right? If you have enemies, it's probably because you're a good guy and they're bad. That would be my assumption. It must be. Right? It's not my fault.
One political code out of the whirlwind on these last chapters revealed by Robert Alter in Comments years ago.
Oh yes. Now this just demands poetic commentary and yes. Okay. So Nehemiah's methods. So we're going to see his relationship with God front and center in this chapter, but over the course of the book, we're going to get to see him much more as a get things done type of a leader. He is entirely selfless, as he makes sure to tell you. If you jump ahead to chapter 5 for a second, we're on page 1847. Verses 14 to 19. He says, "Moreover, from the day the king appointed me as governor of the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, 12 years, I and my brethren did not eat of the governor's food. The former governors who were before me had imposed burdens on the people, took bread and wine from them, 40 silver shekel. Their servants domineered over the people, but I did not do so because of my fear of God. And also I supported the work of this wall. We didn't buy any field. All of my servants were gathered there for work. I didn't request the governor's food, for the labor weighed heavily upon the people. So I was selfless, and I'm going to make sure that you know it." That's the language that he presents in the book, which leads us to source number 3, which I've already alluded to. Source number 3 on your sheet, also from the Talmud towards the end of Sanhedrin. The Gemara asks a question which sort of goes back to Janine's question: why not make this a separate book? But the way that they ask it is, why isn't this called the Book of Nechemiah? If, after all, he wrote the majority of the book, right? If you take the book and look at the majority of it, it's Nehemiah writing. Michti kol mili de Ezra Nehemiah ben Chachalia amrinhu. Nehemiah is the one who recorded Ezra's deeds. Nehemiah ben Chachalia maitamalo ikri sifra al shmei. So why isn't the book named for him? So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says, because he took credit for himself. The sages did not like the idea of somebody tooting his own horn, male or female. Shenamar, and they quote the pasuk here, Zachra li Elokai litova. God, this was the last passage that we, actually it's the verse after what we read in chapter 5. The last sentence in chapter 5, he says, God, you should remember me for the good, for everything that I did for this nation. Rabbi Yosef gave a different reason, because he spoke in a derogatory way about those who preceded him. Right? The governors who preceded me, they took from everybody, they levied their taxes, and their servants dominated the people. So he degraded his predecessors. And Va'afal Daniel Shagalu Menusipir, he even degraded Daniel, who was greater than he was, and how dare he? Don't mess with Daniel. So the Gemara praises him for taking his own credit. Zakkai made the same point in source number 4, when he noted something interesting about this book. The fact that he mentions no intermediary. In fact, throughout his memoir, he never mentions having consulted any powerful ally or even assistant before deciding upon a policy or course of action. Indicates that from the very start, he was determined to receive all the credit for any actions he might take on behalf of his people. In this regard, now Zakheim gives you his own take. This is his political take. In this regard, he acted no differently than any other politician of any era. Yet the very fact that he did so in his memoir testifies to its authenticity. Memoirs invariably serve to glorify their authors. Of course, it is for this very reason that the sages rebuked him. So Zakheim sees it as a negative. But I have to show you that there's another way to read this. We've already pointed out that Nehemiah has enemies. He has enemies who are outside of the Jewish people, who don't like what he's doing in his role as a leader, and he has enemies from within the Jewish people who are perhaps jealous of the power that he wields and the things he's able to do. And so if you take a look at source number 5, Professor Moshe Tzvi Siegel in Encyclopedia Mikra'it says, Efshar shechiburo no'ad l'shamesh ketav magain neged oivav harabim. He says this composition, meaning the book, might have been meant to serve as a defense against his many enemies. He's justifying his actions. And that's why you see his customary prayer in this composition. He keeps saying, God, remember me for the good, like the last sentence in chapter 5. And remember for the worst, the bad deeds of the enemies. So in other words, it's possible that Nehemiah feels a need to justify himself in the book. And this, Zakkai may be right, that the goal of memoirs is to glorify the person writing it, but I think it's also to defend against all of the different allegations. I'm going to set the record straight. Here's what really happened. And then I'll go on to present my perspective. Follow? Yeah.
Does not negate what we had said in 3, why it wasn't given the name of Nehemiah. Then why... If we take what we just said now, then we can't take the other.
Right. So I think you could harmonize the two. I don't have to. Meaning you could be right. It could be that there are two different ways to look at what he did. Or it could be the Talmud recognizes his justification and says it's still wrong. Justifying yourself in Tanakh maybe isn't the best way to go. That's possible. But I want to note one point that I think you can't really miss here. Look at the top of the page on page 18. Well, we're on 1849, 1847 right now, but it really doesn't matter. Go back to the beginning of Nehemiah on page 1837. What does it say in big bold letters in the margin on page 1837, right before verse 1? It says Nechemiah, right?
Right.
And that's the way we've been doing it for a long time, right? Centuries. We've been saying the Book of Nechemiah. The Talmud says he doesn't get his name on the book. Yeah, except he does. So the Chidah, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, in source number 6, says he already had his kapara. He had his atonement. He says, "V'zeh kama me'os shanim." It's already centuries. B'higalos niglos hadefus ba'olam, since the revelation of the printing press. Madpeis ve'olah sefer Nechemiah l'chud. That's a pun. The word madpeis is to print. Matpeis ve'olah is to climb. Matpeis with a tet. Right, with a tet. So the book begins. These are the words of Nechemiah ben Chachaliah. We've already talked about not knowing who Chachaliah is. It is the month of Kislev, right? This is one of those cases in which we get the Babylonian name, as we assume it is, the Babylonian name of a month, as opposed to it was month 4, 5, 6, or whatever it is. It is Shnas Esrim. It is year 20 of King Artaxerxes. V'ani ayisi b'Shushan Avira, and I was in Shushan. Shushan is, of course, known for being the setting where the Purim story takes place, but it's the summer center of the Persian Empire. This is one of those cases in which I think Zakheim has a mistake, because he says it's the winter center, but everything I've seen indicates no, Shushan is where you want to be in the summer. I've never been, but I'm told it's beautiful in the summer. So this is the summertime capital of the Persian Empire, and that's where he is serving King Artaxerxes. Vayavo Hanani echad me'achai hu va'anashim miYehuda. Hanani, one of my achim. We're going to come back to that term. Literally it means brothers. One of my brothers. He came along with men from Yehuda. Va'esh aleim al haYehudim hapleita asher nisharu min hashevi va'al Yerushalayim. And I asked him about the Jews from the remnant to remain from the captivity, and I asked him about Jerusalem. Vayomru li, and they said to me, Hanisharim asher nisharu min hashevi sham ba'medina, those who remain from the captivity there in that land, b'ra'ah gedola u'v'cherpa. Things are really bad. It's humiliating. The Chomas Yerushalayim Meforatzes, the wall of Jerusalem is burst through. It has holes in it. Ush'areh nitzu ba'esh, its gates have been set on fire. Vayihi kishami es hadverim ha'ela. Well, when I heard that, Yashavti va'evkeh va'es abla yamim. I sat and cried and mourned for a period of time. Yamim, days, but yamim is often used to mean longer than that. We don't know how long it is. And I fasted and prayed before the God of heaven being the name that we use for God consistently throughout Ezra and Nehemiah. Koresh used the term also, as I recall. Okay, what questions are sparked by these 4 sentences we just read? What here needs explanation? Definitely something. This is not straightforward. Yeah.
How do we know?
What is their relationship?
Is that suddenly a lineage for us, or?
What's the relationship? But more than that, was this a planned meeting? Was this arranged in advance? If it wasn't arranged, how did you get to the second in command in the empire? Right? Hanani from Judea. Where did this meeting take place? How did this happen? So that's one question, is there a channel back and forth? What's behind this? What else? Focusing on the description of what's going on in sentence 3.
They've been attacked.
Have they been attacked? What are you describing here? Is this just a description of what we already knew was the case since the time when the Babylonians destroyed the temple and sacked Jerusalem? Or is there something new going on at this stage? Those are the 2 main questions that I have reading this. Number 1, is this an arranged meeting or just something spontaneous that somehow took place? And is this about something new, or is this old? So first, in terms of Hanani, the identity of Hanani. He calls him Achi, my brother. It's very interesting to me. Dad Mikra and others assume this is a biological brother. that was really strange to assume that Achad Me'achai, one of my brothers, means a biological brother. Encyclopedia Mikrae thinks it's a general family member. I'm not buying it. I gave you references, which you don't need to spend time looking up right now, but in source number 7, I gave you references to other places in Tanakh, and this wasn't a search. You could probably find many more, in which Achai just means my friend.
Here,
That's Rashi.
In the Sanzino? What?
It says, either kinsman or fellow countrymen, it is doubtful whether blood brother is intended even in chapter 7, verse 2.
Right. My general sense is that it just means an ally. The examples I gave you on the sheet in source number 7, Shmuel Bet is David and Yehona's son, right? Clearly not brothers. They had enough trouble. Shmuel Bet is even better example. The second Shmuel Bet reference is Yoav and Amasa, right before Yoav killed him. He calls him my brother. Then again, there's a lot of that in the Torah, isn't there? And then the one from Malachim Aleph is Shlomo and Hiram, king of Tsur. Also, not brothers, not separated at birth. Alina.
But Yosef, he says, Achai and Yom he's asking for his brothers, not
right.
Moses' brothers.
But right. I'm not saying that Achai never means my biological brothers. I just think that there's really no imperative here to assume it's a biological brother. It's simply one of my friends and allies. That's what I would have said. And indeed, Rashi, Mitzudat, David, and Malbim say it's allies. That's all it is. Yeah.
In just trivia, but in Israel today, when you meet someone in a restaurant, Imashlam Achai. That's the going, how are you guys?
Yeah.
Is Achai is used for no one, not relatives.
Right, it's just, it's brothers loosely.
Yeah.
What is clear is that he knows Hanani, it's not just someone in a restaurant, because in chapter 7, and this is what Susan was alluding to, in chapter 7, sentence 2, he's going to appoint Hanani with guarding the new walls of Yerushalayim. So, Hanani is not just some guy. Hanani is known to him and is a trusted person. Now, based on that, I would assume that this is not a chance meeting. Right? This is not random. This is, I want to keep tabs on what's going on in Judea, and therefore I arranged for a delegation to come visit me, and that's how I know what's going on. So Nehemiah is not lone Jew living in exile off on his own and not interested in Judea. He's interested, he's keeping tabs, and he has a meeting with Jews who made the journey in order to keep him posted. That's what I think is going on. Now I'll show you where the problem comes in. Take a look at source number 8. Josephus has a version of this meeting. And look how he describes it. Now there was one of those Jews that had been carried captive who was cupbearer to King Xerxes. His name was Nehemiah. As this man was walking before Susa, Shushan, the metropolis of the Persians, he heard some strangers that were entering the city after a long journey speaking to one another in the Hebrew tongue. So he went to them and asked them whence they came. And when their answer was that they came from Judea, he began to inquire of them again in what state the multitude was, and in what condition Jerusalem was. And when they replied that they were in a bad state, then he was upset, and so on and so forth. How does Josephus make it sound? This is the Wiston translation, by the way. I didn't translate this from the Greek. Sorry?
Yeah, it was spontaneous.
Completely spontaneous. Oh, some Hebrews. I hear them speaking Hebrew. Let me go see what's going on. And it's outside the walls. Right? He's walking before Susa. He's outside of the citadel. And he happens to encounter them, and just, lo and behold, he gets information. So tell me, it doesn't sound that way in the book at all. He's not some stranger. He is Achai, whatever Achai means. So why did Josephus write that? What motivated him to present it this way?
Does it look sort of like your the multitude that you have eating?
Yep. That's exactly what it looks like. If you are the second in command in the Persian Empire, you are not supposed to have a special interest in the minority, even if it is your minority. You are an agent of the king, and it looks suspicious for you to hold clandestine meetings with the representatives of Judea right? And especially Jews always being vulnerable to the charge of dual loyalty, right? How in the world is this going to look if you are the Jew high up in the government and you're having meetings with the Israelis on the side? It's not going to look good. And for Josephus, this is a special concern. Because remember who Josephus is. He's a Jewish general who survives the mysterious death of the people he was supposed to be leading. That's its own story. And he ends up in the Roman camp, and he ingratiates himself to the Romans. And he writes histories of the Jews that are meant to win the favor of the Romans. And he himself is going to be high up in the government and close with Titus and so on. I think he's afraid when he tells this story, he's afraid of how it's going to look. If he says Jewish higher up in the empire has meetings with Jews off in their land, how long is it going to take for someone to wonder about Josephus personally? This is not my own novelty. Years and years ago, when I learned about Josephus at YU, this was always a point that was made. When you read Josephus, you have to ask yourself, what's his agenda in terms of his relationship with the Romans? And here, I think that's what you're seeing. I think this story is meant to show us Nehemiah was concerned. He was getting a report because he wanted to know what was going on. And what Josephus is doing is he's shading it for his own sake. Clear? Okay. That's in terms of... Sorry?
And also, like, he's writing the history, could it not just be his own sake, but the presentation to other people who are reading about Jews?
That could be. It could be it's not just about his own position, but in general he wants Jews not to be seen as a fifth column. Right. That's possible. So that's in terms of what this meeting is about, but it will also color how we answer the other question, which is, what is Hanani describing? Is this the desolation that happened many years ago? The walls are in ruins. The walls have been ruins already since day one. That's not a novelty. The people are, the remnants of the people are not great. What is this about? So first of all, two different views of what population he's even talking about when he says the remnant Jews. Take a look at source number 9, please, at the read of Malbim. He says, Nir'ah, it appears, Shahayehudim sheshavu birshus koresh, that the Jews who returned with the permission of Cyrus, ve'achakach birshus Artaxerxes, and afterwards with Artaxerxes' permission, hayalem pacha miyuchad, they had a special pacha, a special governor. Rak HaYehud, and that's the reference to Ezra 5 is talking about either Sheshbatzar or Zerubbabel, I forget which, being their leader. Rak HaYehudim shayu sham mikodem, but the Jews who were there from before, meaning Jews who never left, right? Shayu tachas pikudas pachvas ever hanahar. They're under the governor of that general region called the other side of the river, meaning not the other side of the Jordan, the other side of the Euphrates. Those people, Aleihem Sha'al, that's who he was asking about. How are the native Jews, not the Jews who had just returned? And they were in a terrible, shameful state. Because the Pachas oppressed them. And that's what it means when it says those who remained, right? That was the sentence. He asked about the Jews who remained. It means the ones who had remained all along. For everybody else, the Jews who had come back from captivity, the Pacha was a protector for them. For them, it was for them things were relatively good. So the Malbim's read is the conventional read. That Nehemiah is asking him, how are the Jews who have been there all along? And the report is not good. Things are bad these days. Rashi brings you a different approach in source number 10. He says, Sha'alti lahem al inyan pleitas haYehudim asher nisharu b'Yerushalayim min hashevi shel Bavel. I asked about the refugee Jews who had remained in Yerushalayim from Babylonian captivity. In other words, they all came back to the land and they went to their cities, but some stayed in Jerusalem, and he called them the Pleitah. the refugees, Al Shem Shenitzolu Migalus Babel, they have been saved from Babylonian exile. If you wanted to read Rashi to be talking about the Jews who had stayed in Israel all along, you could force Rashi's Hebrew into that, but there are other commentators who are of this view as well, like Mitzudat David, that in fact it's talking about the Jews who had returned from Babylon. Either way, when was this destruction, the burning of the walls? So the conventional read is that this is a new destruction. This is something new. The walls are still in ruin from the Churban, from the destruction of the temple, and they haven't built new walls yet. Right? That part of it is old. But as a result of that, we are constantly under attack now. And to take that back to our question of how long has Nehemiah been in his position, I don't think you can bring any proof from the fact that Hanani came to him now. He's not coming to him now because now Nehemiah is in power. He's coming to him now because now is when it happened. The Jews, remember, we learned back in the book of Ezra, the Jews are under attack by their Samaritan neighbors who don't like this project of building a Beis HaMikdash, of building a temple. And there have been new attacks going on. And Hanani says to Nehemiah, we have a problem because we are vulnerable. Clear? Don Mikra notes that if you were to read Ezra 4 as having taken place where it shows up in the book of Ezra, if you read everything as though the books are written in chronological order, they actually did start building the walls at one point, because in Ezra 4 we had that. I didn't feel that you had to read that story as having occurred then. But if you read it that way, then they did start to build walls, and that's what burned. Okay. So Nehemiah is very upset. Right? Sentence 4, his reaction is crying, fasting, praying, sounds an awful lot like Ezra. Right? This is indistinguishable from Ezra. Ezra's reaction when he heard about the intermarriages, that's his reaction when he hears about what has happened. And then he bursts forth in prayer, just as Ezra did. But there are some striking things about this prayer. Take a look first, before you read this prayer, take a look at Daniel chapter 9. I referenced it on your sheet in source number 11. Daniel chapter 9. This is in page 1801. You don't have to flip far. Remember that Daniel is not that long before Nehemiah. Right? He's a generation or two. He's the first generation of Babylonian exiles. So Daniel, in this part of the book of Daniel, he has visions related to the prediction of Jewish suffering and then ultimately return in a messianic time. And he gets a vision which frightens him. And look what he says to God. And here, really, the Hebrew will help you more than the English. For those who have the Hebrew, you'll recognize a lot of his language. He says, chapter 9, sentence 4, the very beginning of it, he says, Ana Hashem, Hakel HaGadol HaNorah, Shomer HaBris VeHaChesed LaOhavav L'Shomrei Mitzvosav. Those are phrases we know. Hakel HaGadol VeHaNorah is a phrase that's very similar to what Moshe uses, which we're going to see shortly. Shomer HaBris VeHaChesed LaOhavav is straight out of the Torah as well. Parshas Va'eschanan, Devarim chapter 7. Chatanu, Avinu, these are standard phrases for sin. He goes on to describe the sins of the Jewish people and to draw on verses in Tanakh throughout this rather extended prayer. I'm not going to go through the entire thing because this is a class about Ezra and Nehemiah, not about Daniel. But Nehemiah is going to do the same thing. Nehemiah is going to do the same exact thing, drawing on verses from around Tanakh. Let's take a look at his prayer, and I gave you the references on the sheet, which we're not going to look up now, but I give to you for homework. You'll see the way that he draws on passages in Tanakh. Sentence 5, back in Nehemiah. So what page are we on now? I've lost track of where we are. Sorry? 1839, thank you. Again, the Hebrew will help you more in terms of the associations with other verses. Va'omar, he says, and I said, Ana Hashem Elokei Hashemayim, God, please, the God of the heavens. Hakel, Hagadol, V'Hanora. Sound familiar? Same as Daniel. Shomer, Habris, V'Chesed, La'ohavav, L'Shomrei Mitzvasav. Same as Daniel. Right? They literally translated, the great and awesome God, guardian of the covenant and kindness for those who love Him, those who keep His mitzvot. Pasuk Vav, sentence 6. Tihina oznecha kasheves, ve'einecha fisuchos, lishmoa el tfilas avdecha, asher anochi mispalel fonecha hayom yomam v'alayla al b'nei Yisrael avadecha. He says, may your ear hear, may your eyes be open to hear the prayer of your servant, that which I pray to you today, day and night, for the Jews who serve you. This statement of his is very like Shlomo HaMelech when he dedicated the Beis HaMikdash, and he said, God, please pay attention to, turn your eyes, turn your ears to the prayer of the Jews, which they will pray in their exiles towards you. I am admitting the sins of the Jews, asher chatanu lach, which we have sinned to you. Vani uveis avi chatanu, and I have sinned, and my household has sinned. Then the next two sentences, I don't think have a parallel elsewhere. I think the next two sentences are original. Chavol chaval nulach. That's a very hard phrase to translate. Literally, chavol chaval nulach, we have wounded you. Is that the way your translations take it?
We have corruptly.
We have dealt corruptly with you. Destructively with you. Okay, we're going to have to come back to that phrase. I'm not going to do it right now. But it means we've done something bad, but we have to come back to the specifics because it's actually a fascinating point. We didn't keep the laws that you commanded Moshe your servant. Remember that which you instructed Moshe your servant, saying, Atem tim'alu, you trespass. Note the word tim'alu, mal, just the same word that Ezra used for their intermarriages. I'm going to scatter you among the nations. If you sin, you're going to get hit. So I remember that, he says, and I admit what we've done, but keep in mind what you then told us. And here he starts to quote Chumash again. Vishavtem elai, you return to me. Ushmartem mitzvosai, you guard my mitzvot. Va'asisem osam, you practice them. Im yehyeni dachachem b'ktei hashamayim misham akabetzim. If you are scattered to the edges of the earth, I will gather them from there. Just like Moshe said, Im yehyeni dachacha b'ktei hashamayim misham akabetzcha Hashem Elokecha. Or here's another one. V'haviosim el hamakom asher bacharti. I will bring them to the place I selected, l'shakenes shemi sham, to place my name. You can see it on your sheets. I gave you the references to the verses that he is paralleling, so you have the option of looking them up. Vehem avadecha ve'amecha. Also a direct quote from Moshe. Parshas Akev, correct. They are your servants. Is Moshe. Asher padisa b'chochacha gadol u'b'yadcha chazaka, who you redeemed with your great strength, with your mighty hand. Slight difference from what Moshe said. Moshe said, Asher padisa b'chochacha gadol u'b'zroacha hanitzuya. But it's fundamentally the same point. And he says, Ana Hashem, please God. He now concludes, Tihina aznacha kasheves el tfilas avdecha ve'el tfilas avadecha. May your ear listen. Once again, that point about the ear listening to the prayer of your servants and to the prayer of your servants, plural, myself and the community. Hachafeitzim liyira'ayis shemecha, who want to revere your name. Ve'atzlicha nala avdecha hayom. Make your servant successful today. Usnehu l'rachamim lifnei ha'ish hazeh. Give him mercy before that man. Who is that man? Who does he want mercy in front of? No, in front of King Artaxerxes. He's saying, you can imagine Esther saying this, right? Give me mercy in front of that man, Achashverosh, right? Give me mercy in front of Artaxerxes. he concludes, this is not part of the prayer, this is him turning to the audience, and he says, and I was the cupbearer at this point, and therefore in position to do something about this. That's the statement of Nehemiah. Okay, so that's his prayer. What's the idea here of building off of these verses in Tanakh? What is it that Nehemiah is trying to accomplish?
Continuity.
What do you mean?
That he's carrying on that he's the next in line as a leader.
Next in line as a leader. In other words, I am the outgrowth of those who came before me. Right? Good.
Jog their memories. He's not the only one, but it's already been said with Moshe, and I'm reiterating and showing you, A, my knowledge, and B, that I'm not the first one to say this. This was already at Sinai.
Right, and that actually is something that we do as well, right? We consistently, every blessing we have in the Amidah, in general, our prayers are structured on the ones found in Tanakh, on verses found in Tanakh. We always incorporate them. Rifa'inu Hashem b'nei Rafei is Yirmiyahu. Rifa'ini Hashem b'nei Rafei. That's true for everything that we do. It's built on biblical verses.
You're giving yourself strength by referring to those who came before.
Strength, authenticity. I think these are to the point. It's the way that we traditionally pray. This is what we do, and this is what he does. Also, I think it establishes Nehemiah's religious identity. He's not only a political figure, he's a religious leader as well. But I think there's one more element here. The lines that he quotes come from really just two speakers. He doesn't bring you from all over Tanakh. He brings you from Moshe, on the verge of entry into Israel, right, in Devarim, Moshe's last speech to the Jews. Or next to last, if you count Hazinu separately, fine. The Jews on the verge of their entry into Israel, and Shlomo on dedicating the first Beis Hamikdash. Right, that speech from Shlomo and Malachim, that's when they're dedicating the first temple. So Nehemiah is looking to rejuvenate this third entry into the land. And he echoes Moshe at the first entry into the land, Shlomo the second entry into the land, and here we are at the third. And my prayer is going to evoke those leaders from the first two times. And I think that may also be what he's trying to accomplish here. There is more to be said, as always. Next time, God willing, we're going to come back to this prayer, because there are some things that we need to see about it, and then we'll go further into the second parak, God willing. We are zooming. Thank you very much.